All right, we're going to talk about subject-verb agreement and verb tense today. So not the most exciting thing in the world, but it's important when we're putting sentences together that you are able to construct the sentences appropriately and use verb forms and tenses appropriately. All right, so from the beginning here, subject-verb agreement is basically when the subject and the verb are either both plural or both singular in form. You can't have one be singular and the other one be plural. So it's also sometimes called singular-plural disagreement or plural singular disagreement, that kind of thing. The most common errors would be when the writer doesn't know what they're supposed to do, like they don't know the rule or they're not aware of the rule. And we'll go through some of those common issues here. One thing that writers stumble over sometimes is if they don't know if the subject itself is singular or plural. So as an example, you have the word statistics, which can be plural, statistics show that, or it could be singular. For example, the noun 101 is one class, or the statistics class, right? So in that case, it would be singular. And then also, one of the issues where people tend to stumble is if there's more than one simple subject, whether or not it's supposed to be plural or singular. And we'll talk about how to make that determination. All right, so looking at the examples here, you have two correct examples and then two incorrect examples, and they're basically the opposite, right? So the correct example, the high levels of air pollution cause damage to the respiratory tract. So high levels, plural, so the verb form cause needs to be plural. The second example in green, the high level of air pollution causes damage to the respiratory tract. High level is singular, no S on it. So causes needs to be singular. And this is something that throws people off, but the S form doesn't make verbs plural, right? So it's used when you have a third person present tense, situation. So it's the opposite, basically. So that kind of throws people off because they see S's on nouns and they're like, oh, it's plural. So if you see an S on a verb, it must be plural, but that's not the case. So the opposite then would be incorrect examples here in red. The high levels of air pollution causes damage. That should sound to most people should just hit the ear wrong. The high level of air pollution caused damage. Again, that should hit the ear wrong. But if you're not used to hearing the English language spoken, let alone seeing it, it can cause problems if you don't recognize that. All right, so we have multiple simple subjects, the easy decisions. So if you have two or more simple subjects and you have the word and in between them, the subject is always going to be plural. The complete subject is going to be plural, so the verb needs to be plural. So an example, Tina and Mike like pancakes. For simple subjects joined with or, nor, either or, and neither nor, if they're both singular, you don't have to worry about it because then the verb has to be singular. If an infant or child is having difficulty breathing, seek medical attention immediately. The simple subjects there, and infant and child, are both singular, so you don't have to make any kind of decision. Also, if the simple subjects are both plural, you don't need to worry about it because then it's definitely plural. If infants or children are having difficulty breathing, seek medical attention immediately. That is plural infants, plural children, so the verb needs to be plural. Some tough decisions here, probably the toughest one for people, is if you have multiple simple subjects joined together with either or, nor, etc., and one is singular and one is plural, what do you do with the verb, right? Because it's hard to decide if you don't know the rule. Well, the rule is that whatever simple subject is closest to the verb, that's the plural or singular form that you take. So if the simple subject closest to the verb is plural, then the verb is plural. If the simple subject closest to the verb is singular, then the verb is singular. So an example here, neither the doctor nor the nurses were able to make the patient reconsider. Because nurses is plural, then the verb has to be plural. And one way that you can check that is to lop off the beginning of the sentence, just to check if you're using the correct verb form there. The nurses were able to make the patient reconsider. So nurses were. That sounds right to most people, right? But that's what's behind that rule, is that you look at the subject that's closest to the verb to make that decision. You can also, of course, flip it around. So an example where the verb would be singular here, neither the nurses nor the doctor was able to make the patient reconsider. The doctor is singular, that's closest to the verb now. So the verb needs to be singular. Again, try lopping off the first part of the sentence and just look at the one simple subject. The doctor was able to make the patient reconsider. Doctor is singular, the word was as a verb needs to be singular. Another tricky one would be the indefinite pronouns, because most people aren't sure if they're singular or plural. Most of them are singular, right? So you can just assume if you see anybody, anyone, anything, each, either, everybody, everyone, etc., that it is singular. And one way to check that is to just look at the last part of most of those words, body, one, thing. In each case there, it's just one, right? One body, one, the word one thing. And so that's an indicator that it is singular. So example, no one knows the answer to that question. Everyone knows the answer to that question, both singular. Another tricky one would be collective nouns. So when you have a group of something, the individual items multiplied would be, plural, but if you're talking about the group in total, it becomes a collective noun, which means that it should be singular. So examples of groups of nouns, a bunch of bananas. If you have more than one banana, it's usually plural, right? But in this case, we're talking about a bunch, so it's singular. We're talking about the bunch here. Another example, the whole group of students. Students would normally be plural, but group, we're talking about the group, one group. So that is singular. An example here, the class respects the teacher. The class is made up of multiple people, but there's one class that's being talked about, so it's singular. There are weird cases where that can be flipped around. For example, if it's implied that you are indicating multiple individuals within the class and you need the noun and the pronoun to match, you can have the verb be plural for something you would assume would be singular. So for example, in this rare case, the class are debating amongst themselves. The issue here is you have class, which we normally think of as singular, but you also have themselves, which is plural pronoun. And the way to think about this is that the class members are debating amongst themselves. So multiple entities within that class, plural, the verb would be plural, the pronoun would be plural, and they all match. So that's pretty rare, but it does happen every once in a while. All right, so we have some subject-verb agreement practice here. You have everyone know or knows the patient's family. So again, remember with those indefinite pronouns, look for the one part of that. Every one should tip you off that it's singular. So in this case, singular, third person, present tense, it has to be the S form of the verb. So everyone knows the patient's family. Number 2, most nurses don't or doesn't get breaks regularly. So most nurses, you're talking about multiple nurses. So you need to use the plural form, don't, get breaks regularly. The third one, whenever GI patients call or calls back with questions, the on-call doctor must be paged. So whenever GI patients, plural, call back with questions, the on-call doctor must be paged. So call is correct there. Number 4, people need or needs help getting to the hospital sometimes. In this case, people is plural, so need is the correct verb. Help getting to the hospital. And again, most of these would sound wrong if you've been raised around the language. It just hits the ear wrong. But it can be harder to see that on paper. So people needs help getting to the hospital sometimes. Should hit the ear wrong, right? That's why I often encourage people to say things out loud when they're writing. So if you are to the revision part or the editing part, and you're not going to bug anybody, try reading it out loud because you might catch something that your eyes are missing. All right, number 5, the patient and family members request a private room. In this case, you have 2 simple subjects, but they're connected with an and, so you're adding them together, so it has to be plural. So the patient and family members request a private room. Number 6, neither the visitors nor the patient know or knows who pushed the call late. So neither the visitors nor the patient. So you've got that either or nor situation going on. So you need to look to see if they're both singular, both plural, or one's singular, one's plural. And in this case, you have visitors, which is plural, and patient, which is singular, but patient is closest to the the verb. So that is what is used to determine if it's singular or plural. So again, try lopping off the first part of the sentence. The patient knows who pushed the call late. So patient knows. So you're going to use the S form there. Number 7, either the babysitter or the kids walks the dog every day. So in this case, you have the either or nor again situation. And again, you have babysitter singular, kids, which is plural. Kids is closer to the verb. Kids is plural, so walk. You need to have the plural verb. The kids walk the dog every day. Number 8, when the patient or the family members arrive or arrives, please call me. In this case, you have the either or nor situation. Patient is singular, family members is plural. Family members happens to be closest to the verb here. So plural noun, it needs to have a plural verb. So the family members arrive. Please call me. And then number 9 is just the flip of that. So flipping around the 2 simple subjects there. When the family members or the patient arrive, please call me. Right? That's hitting the ear wrong. Cut the front of the sentence off. Just say the patient arrives. Please call me. So in this case, you've got the third person, singular, present tense. So you're going to use the S form of the verb. And I put the answers there, but I flipped them upside down for people who would want to, scroll ahead. So you can flip those around if you want to double check what we went over. We'll talk a little bit here about tenses for the verbs. We've got 5 tenses for English verb forms, with the exception of to be, the to be verb. You've got the base form, I walk the patient to the lavatory. You've got past tense happening in the past. Yesterday, I walked the patient to the lavatory. You have past participle, which means you're adding a helping verb. So I have walked the patient to the lavatory. Present participle, still adding that helping verb. I am walking the patient to the lavatory. And then the S form, which again, third person, singular, present tense only. Can you use that S form? The patient walks to the lavatory. So you can see the word walk being used in each of those. The tricky one would be to be. The verb to be has 8 forms, just to throw a wrench in it. So you have be, am, is, are, was, were, being, and been. So, that's something to keep in mind, that the to be verb has different forms that look very different from each other, and, is not subject to that 5 tense rule. Another thing to consider is that when you're changing those verbs between the tenses, so are you adding letters, etc., you need to consider if it's a regular verb or if it's an irregular verb. And of course, regular verbs are the good ones in that they're consistently following the language pattern. So past tense and past participle are treated the same for regular verbs. They both take an ed or a d ending. So I walk becomes I walked or I have walked. So adding an ed there because the word does not end in an e. Another example, I like. Since the word already ends in an e, you just add a d. I like becomes I liked, I have liked. Just a word of warning, it's not wrong per se, but in the American dialect, we don't typically use the t endings for verbs. There are some exceptions, like the word slept, but other dialects will use the t ending interchangeably with the ed ending. So learned becomes learnt. And if you're not used to that, it can be a little surprising at first, but again, it's not wrong. It's just a different dialect of English, and it just depends on what dialect you're trying to use, and if you want people to, easily understand what you're saying in writing, you would want to follow that dialect. All right, so the irregular verbs are the troublemakers because they change significantly or not at all between their base form, past tense, and past participle. So I have just a few examples here. There are a lot more. You can Google a list of irregular verbs. There's just, too many to even try to memorize. So this is more of a use thing, that the more you use them, the better you will get at using them. And this is where I really advocate reading. The more you read, the more you will see these words being used correctly, so you'll get the context quicker, than if you weren't reading. So we have just a short list here. Go as the base form becomes went, past tense, and past participle would be gone or have gone. So I go to the store, I went to the store, I have gone to the store. And some of them don't change at all. So you've got bet, that stays bet, and becomes have bet. So that one doesn't change at all between the base form, past tense, and past participle. Some of these we mix up, so we actually use them incorrectly more often than not. So for example, the word lay means put. So if you put something down, I lay it down. Past tense, I laid it down or I have laid it down. Lie in this context means recline. So I lie down, I lay down, I have lain down. So we use those incorrectly so often that people will use lay and laid and lie incorrectly. Just something to be aware of. It's just part of English growing. I think at some point we will technically recognize them as interchangeable, but we haven't quite gotten there yet. If you're, working with somebody who's really strict about grammar rules. All right, thanks for your attention.